And maybe it's my own age and my own generation, but one of my pet peeves right now is the anti-vaccination movement. And there are some Hollywood stars and other people who have urged people not to get their kids vaccinated, arguing the vaccines cause autism and that sort of stuff, despite the fact there's been more than 24 studies looking for a connection between vaccination and autism, and it simply hasn't shown up. But as a result of a lot of people being nervous about getting their kids vaccinated, right now there is a whooping cough epidemic in the Bay Area, and kids have died from this sort of thing. And Harry and I were talking, being of a certain age, about growing up in an era before the polio vaccine. And to try to explain what polio was like to my own students, I show them some photographs that were taken in Los Angeles in 1949, when in a particularly wet summer there was a polio epidemic in Los Angeles. And what had happened is a hospital had so many polio patients, they had taken their cafeteria, cleared the tables out, and they had like 30 kids, and the photograph shows this, in iron lungs in the cafeteria. And kids today do not know what an iron lung was, but when I was growing up, that was the thing you were fearful for. And my mother, for example, who was always looking for a way to control me, because I was kind of a rambunctious kid, would say, don't go play in the brook because you'll fall in, you'll get a chill, and you'll get polio. Or you can't go there because it's too crowded and you might get polio. So finally, when the Salk vaccine came along, and I think I was about 9 years old when it came along, I practically ran to the school where they're giving the vaccines and saying, please vaccinate me so my mother can no longer tell me not to play in the brook because I was going to get polio. And those of us who were freed from having to worry about polio, and everybody did when I was a kid, appreciated the value of vaccination. But I think many people take it for granted today that there are no such diseases as polio and whooping cough and diphtheria and measles and mumps. And there certainly are such diseases, and failure to vaccinate, I think, is just the height of irresponsibility. And I particularly irritated, as I say, at public people, Hollywood stars, who are urging parents not to have their kids vaccinated. It's irresponsible. Okay, Flock of Dodos is set here in Kansas, and it's largely about the evolution intelligent design debates in 2004, 2005, leading up to the 2006 elections. And it comes about in part because Randy's mom lives across the street from John Calvert, who headed the Intelligent Design Network in Kansas and was a big mover and shaker in getting the school board to change the standards in 2005. So Randy is a PhD scientist. I actually knew Randy when he was in grad school at Harvard, where I was an assistant professor. But he gave up professoring. He had a very good job, went to Hollywood, took lessons in stand-up comedy, no kidding, and decided to become a film producer. So Flock of Dodos is a satirical film about the evolution debates in Kansas and other places. And the Flock of Dodos things has a double meaning. And that is, it's pretty critical of intelligent design people. He doesn't think that they're legitimate scientists, they're trying to do something religious. But he also focuses on a group of scientists, guys from Harvard and MIT, who meet for a weekly poker game. And he got his cameras there and he had them discuss things. And one of the things that came out in this is that scientists in general are terrible at public communication. They can't make themselves clear. They alienate people. They tend to be arrogant at times. And I think a lot of that fault is within the scientific community. And Randy wrote a book that came out last year. It's really a funny book. And it's called Don't Be Such a Scientist. And it's about how poor scientists are in communication. And I try to train my own graduate students when they give scientific seminars, is saying, I want you to pretend that you're explaining the work you do to your mother. Now, no slurs on mothers. What I mean by somebody in your family who's not a technical specialist. That's how you should talk about your work. You don't have to make it sound scientific, make it sound straightforward. And the greatest scientists in the world are people who, like Richard Feynman, who could explain their work in simple terms, or somebody like Carl Sagan. And the interesting thing is, I think the scientific community really has to pay attention to its own public image. We're just not very good at that. We don't reward that well within the scientific community, and sometimes we look down at people who are good at it. And I think part of restoring trust for science is better communication. I confess to being a National Public Radio addict. I just listen to it all the time. Harry probably realizes this. I've been staying at this house, and every now and then my computer is just blaring National Public Radio at any time during the day. But one of the programs I never miss is Science Friday. Friday Afternoon with Ira Flato. It's the best science program on the radio. And very often, Ira Flato, who's the host, has wonderful guests who can explain their science in clear language. But I have to tell you, every other guest is hopeless. And I can listen to that program, and I can listen to the host trying desperately to extract a plain English sentence from the scientist he has on the radio, and often failing. So every time I speak to a scientific society, I yell and scream that basically, if you think the American public has a problem with scientific literacy, and maybe it does, it's more your fault, meaning the community, than theirs.
I want us all to thank Ken for taking his time to come all this way.
Thank you.